Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word which means non-harm or non-violent, and we thought it was a natural relationship between the way milk is produced or should be produced and the meaning of the Sanskrit word ahimsa. And it's become like yoga. People are getting used to it now, and there's an explanation behind it. So it matches very nicely with the project and the purpose and goals of the project. The project started in 2007, and it began with actually, at that time I was running an educational project, and I had a friend, and she used to help out on the farm at Bhaktivedanta Manor. She used to work with the oxen, and she said, why don't we do something about milk? And I said, milk? Well, I know the ethics of it, but I'm not sure if I'm the right person. I said, no, we should really, let's do something about milk. So somehow, anyway, we decided to go forward and to start this project to really educate people about how milk is produced. And that was the seed of the idea. So the first 2-3 years were all based around raising awareness. But as I said, as we started to raise awareness, people said, well, where's the milk? And so we really had to think outside the box. We were looking to work with Bhaktivedanta Manor at that time, but they had limited land and limited space, and it didn't look like a place to go. So we started to explore around, and we were quite fortunate because in the early days we had the director of the Soil Association had visited that particular farm. His name was Patrick Holden, and he was very inspired by the work of the oxen particularly. So he was encouraging, and so I stayed in touch with him, and I also started to do some research with the Organic Milk Suppliers Cooperative, OMSCO, and through their help we started to see if there were farms that could possibly work with this. And after a bit of a journey and a few mishaps, we found a farm. They helped us to find a farm in Kent called Commonwork, and that was also an organic farm. It was sort of a charitable initiative, but they had 250 cows, and they liked our ethos and our approach, and they said, we're happy to pilot something with you. So although the initiative began in 2007, in 2010 we set up Ahimsa Dairy Foundation formally as a not-for-profit company, and we began the project. When we arrived in Kent at Commonwork, we set aside 6 cows, and these 6 cows were going to be kept to the Ahimsa standard. And originally they were under the ownership of Commonwork Organic Farm, but as soon as they would leave the farm, they would come into our ownership. So any of those 6 cows or their offspring. And neither of us were really farmers per se, but we had a vision for the future. And so with their help, we started this project. And in 2011, we produced our first bottle of milk. We had an aspiration at that time that we wanted to see Ahimsa milk in supermarket stores and everywhere. And actually, at one point, a few years later, Selfridges even approached us. But we were not, we realized actually we wanted to do this project without becoming dependent on supermarkets or any big stores, because we had seen that many people who worked, many farmers who worked with supermarkets were put under a lot of pressure. And if that supermarket chose to go with somebody else, they lost out. So we made a decision that we would work directly with customers or with very small specialized outlets or farmers markets. So that's how the project developed. Although initially when we were working with Commonwork, we learned a lot. We knew that at some point there had to be a departure, because theirs was a system based on 250 cows. Ours was a system based on 6 cows and their offspring. So at some point there was a bit of tension, and we knew it was time to move on and to establish our own farm at our own standards. And we we subsequently, with some friends, produced this manifesto, and this manifesto has the core principles by which we work. This manifesto has the core principles by which we work. When we separated from common work, we ended up going. Our non-milking cows went to Wales, and from Wales then we went to Leicester, and we were, again, because we didn't have our own facility, we were dependent on others, and it didn't quite fit in. There's only 2.5 years ago when we first got the first piece of our own land, 48 acres, that we felt finally we got stability, and we started to grow on the right, in the right way. We finally got our own bull, which means that there's no artificial insemination. Our cows have their own calves on the farm. We have our own bull. We had our own place for our oxen. We've now started to look at growing our own vegetables. We're producing some very high quality compost from the dung that we produce. And, very slowly we have our bees and we have our honey, ahimsa honey, not just, any straw honey, but raw honey from our own bees. So we really want to show a model first. So we're still very small, still very pioneering, very early days. And, I say that we're at base camp on our climb to Everest. Very soon we hope to get to that next step of, Camp 2 and then build up. And I hope that over the next 5 to 10 years, we will be able to demonstrate, what Ahimsa is really about. We do have many people asking us, we want milk and whatever. And we're working on some ideas, and there are certain things that we're looking at in the not too distant future where, we want to start small little micro dairies in other places. But I can't say too much about that until, we're ready for it. I always fear speaking too soon about too many things because things go wrong. But we do have plans that between, our manifesto is all about 2017 to 2030. So that's the period that we're looking to not only establish our flagship project, but to be able to start smaller farms. And, more recently, we've been very fortunate that the Krishna Center in London is looking to possibly invest in some land not far from us, and they will buy the land and we will manage the farm. We will produce the milk for them. And I think that's a lovely model. And I hope that in the future we'll be able to develop similar relationships with other bodies and other organizations, whereby the lessons that we've learned and the model that we're producing, that we will be able to work in collaboration with other organizations and help them also to produce Ahimsa milk. We produce about 80 litres of milk a day. It's coming towards winter, it will go down a little bit. In spring it'll go up. We do mainly raw milk, some pasteurized milk for families with children. We have a hard cheese that we're doing, Gouda cheese, and we're looking at a mild cheese soon. We used to do halloumi a few years ago. We want to do halloumi again. Several years ago we were producing yogurts in clay pots, and I have a strong desire to create livelihoods around the cow family. Our logos of 3 cows: mother cow, father cow and baby cow. And so what I wanted to do is to be able to create a livelihood for one person who's just producing clay pots, and in those clay pots we produce yogurt, which we sell. We've trialed it several times, and we have people who are waiting for that as well. So that's something that we're looking at. There are other innovative things we want to look at in the future, to produce cow poo paper, to produce cow dung bricks, and a range of other products which seem a bit odd in the UK, but I know that they've been done in other parts of the world. We have a threefold aim. Initially, we wanted to begin by showing a way that milk can be produced ethically. I mean, truly ethically. When you think about how milk is produced in this day and age in an industrial way, over 100,000 calves are sent for slaughter, male calves are sent for slaughter. Cows, which are 5 to 6 years old, once they become either infertile or their milk production falls slightly, are sent off for the food chain. So we wanted to show a true way how milk should be produced. And our inspiration really came from the Krishna farm at Bhaktivedanta Manor in Hertfordshire. And they have a wonderful dairy where they're showing a perfect example of how cows should be looked after and how they could be kept for life, maintained for life, and they work in relationship with cows. So we wanted to be able to produce milk in a way that reflected that, but for the public. But there were 3 phases. The first thing was to really show that milk can be produced in a harmonious, symbiotic ways with cows without exploiting them. The step 2 was all to do with producing an economic solution for oxen. If we're not going to slaughter any boy calves or bulls, oxen, what do we do with them and how do we work with them? And third aspect was all to do with creating a system, either a community or a system of a village where artisan products could be produced so that people can live in a much more simpler way. Just to put it into context, when I was a teenager, I used to be a hardcore vegan, and I used to take my message and ram it down people's throats. It wasn't always the best way, but I was very passionate about the cause because of the way the dairy industry worked. And so it was always my intention to try and do something, and an opportunity came up. And so we decided to pursue this particular path with a small team and see where it took us. In fact, when we started the project, our whole idea was to educate people. And we wanted to really just tell people the real story of milk. We did a video right at the early stages, which was the real story of milk, about how milk is really produced. Milk looks so innocent, looks, white and clean, but actually there's a very dark story behind there. And our whole point was to educate people. I'm not a farmer, I'm a dreamer. And we wanted to educate people. When we started educating people, they said, "Where's the milk?" And when we pointed to the farm that we saw was producing it in the right way, they didn't have enough. In fact, it wasn't for sale to the public. So we started to explore ways of producing this milk, how to do it in a way that would really set an example for the future. We want people to experience the difference. We want people to come and hug our cows and cuddle our cows. We want people to milk by hand. We want people to experience it and experience the happiness that they feel and the happiness their children feel. And then they will want to see these sort of farms coming up. Not that the problem with profit is that as soon as people have the profit mode, yes, of course, there needs to be profit to be able to maintain an operation. And yes, we certainly want to demonstrate that. But we don't want to make the cow a cash cow again. There was one day, just as we were starting, there was one small organization which decided to copy us. And they thought, fine, fantastic, we can make a big profit on this. And they found a farm and started to copy us, but with 100 cows. Within 2 years, they were out of action because their motive was wrong, because it was just profit motive. It was, cash cow, forget the pun. And, after 2 years, they couldn't sustain it. This has to be our revolution is all about family farms, about small farms and dairies. And yes, if they grow, they have to grow very organically and in a very sensitive way that works with the land. So it's not about exploiting, it's not about taking, but it's about giving. We have to give back to the earth to get back from the earth. So it's a relationship. We have a relationship with the earth and we have a relationship with cows. And that's really what we want to promote and push. Presently, not just here in the UK, but throughout the world, milk is a business. It's an industry. And how milk is produced is that a cow takes birth. If it's a female cow, she will become a future milker. If it's a male calf, there are two routes for a male calf. Either they will be fattened for meat, and within the first, maybe 3 years at the most, they'll be sent for slaughter, or within the first 3 days. The average lifespan of a male calf in the UK is 3 days. It's quite a shocking number, 3 days. A cow's natural lifespan is 17 to 20 years, 17, 18 years average. But the average lifespan of a male calf is 3 days. So practically it loses its whole life. So this in itself was a big challenge. A female will grow to become a milking cow, and she will be impregnated every year for 3 years, for 4 years, for 5 years, every year. Once her milk yield falls slightly, or she becomes infertile, then she'll enter the food chain. She'll be sent for slaughter, basically. So usually 5 to 6 years. So conventional, I always see things in 3 ways: conventional farms, organic farms, and what we were striving for, Ahimsa farms. On conventional farms, the average lifespan of a cow is 5 to 6 years. A milking cow is 5 to 6 years, after which she's sent for slaughter. An organic farm, it may be anywhere between 9 and 12 years. Sometimes a little bit longer, but generally 9 to 12 years. And then obviously what we wanted to show was an example of where a cow is not sent for slaughter at all. She can live out her full life. For a male calf on an organic, on a conventional farm, 3 days average. Organic farm, normally they would be fattened and then would go for veal, anywhere between 3 months and 3 years. And then obviously on the Ahimsa farm, we want to make sure that they can have their full lives also. So these are different types of scenarios. Now, add to that in modern farming, and what's the American model of a dairy farm is what's really been sold around the world, and that's a mega farm. An American mega farm is the size of 22 football pitches, and on those 22 football pitches, the cows who live there, there'll be 8,000 to 12,000 cows, and they would never see the light of day. They don't have any natural food. It's just processed proteins which are fed to them, so they produce more milk. They walk 50 yards between where they are, and they have these big machines which they take around it, and they're milked 3 times a day. It's quite a horrendous situation. So we wanted to throw light on some of these things. So the majority of the milk that we see in supermarkets comes from farms like this. Now in the UK, there's only one mega farm. It's in Wales, but there are many dairies where cows are kept in most of the year. They're not out most of the year, and we wanted to bring raise awareness on these issues. Conventional dairy, organic dairy, Ahimsa dairy. In a conventional dairy, a calf is often taken away straight at birth, so a relationship is not developed with the mother. In organic dairy, the general standard is about 4 days. 4 days that a calf can stay with the mother, so that attachment doesn't develop too deeply. The calf is still fed the mother's milk, but in the bottle. With an Ahimsa dairy, minimal, is 6 months until the calf. Normally, a calf will, after 3 months, will start to eat grass and hay. So 6 months allows a natural weaning period for the calf. So we say minimal 6 months. So it may be much longer depending on the relationship. So for a cow in a conventional dairy, I remember visiting one dairy, and we were just trying to feed some cows some sort of grass or some vegetables, green vegetables. They couldn't relate to, there was a sort of almost like a fear. Organic dairies, there was a little bit more interaction, But, you know, for the Ahimsa Dairy, we're really looking to develop relationships with cows. You know, cows are intelligent, sentient beings, and we want them to be able to have that relationship with their calves and with the, you know, with the cow herds, with their human counterparts. The quality of the milk also varies. When a cow has that relationship with its calf, there's that loving relationship, and the milk is a much, much better quality, and it's infused with. It just tastes different. There's a love in the milk, whereas, you know, sometimes in a conventional area, people will say, "Oh, it's just milk. It's just milk," but actually, those who taste that milk will be able to taste the difference between the quality of milk, which just comes for the sake of milking, where it's the cow's a milking machine, or when the cow has a loving relationship with its calf. Now, a cow, people often say to us, you know, you're taking the cow, you know, you're taking away the milk from the calf. Well, actually, it's not true. A cow will give so much milk, and it'll get more than enough milk. So a calf can only drink so much, and there's still extra milk. And even after a calf is weaned off, even after 6 months, a cow will continue to give milk for a much longer period if a relationship is there with the cow. Now, it may diminish over the years, but it will still continue to give milk. On our farm, we have two, I call them our miracle cows. We have one cow, Jasmine. She was suckled by another cow's calves, and she started to give milk, and she continued to give milk even after those calves stopped suckling. And to this day, she gives 6 to 8 litres every day. We have another cow called Rosie. She lost her calf when she was at birth. The calf died. Rosie started to give milk. And what happens now is that in spring, suddenly when the good grass comes, her udders become big, and she has to be milked. And so she gives a lot of milk, and then as we come to winter, it goes down, 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 and it almost comes to a stop. And then spring again, it goes up again. And it's been like that for 4 or 5 years now. So when you look after cows and there's a relationship with those cows, they will reciprocate. So for us, the whole approach is a very much a symbiotic relationship. We have a relationship with those cows, and we look after them, and they look after us. And that's how it works. The American model of mega farms is something that's been exported all over the world, and those mega farms is a model that's now being sold in the Middle East and in China. And China doesn't have a history of milk drinking, actually. They drink very little milk, but like so many things which come from the West and from America, they get sold in other places. And now China's developing a super mega dairy, which not just 8,000 cows, but I think about 30, 40,000 cows in one place, and producing milk in this horrendous way. Yeah, it's a very sad situation. So what we want to do is we're going totally the opposite way. We want to show a way which goes against industrial farming. We're totally opposed to industrial farming. We want to bring back micro dairies. We want to bring back family farms, because we want to show that actually these things happen on a small level rather than these huge, massive things, which are really just factory farms, and they just exploit animals, and just the whole motive is profit. Our whole motive is principle before profit. We have to follow this principle, and no matter how difficult it is, we bite the bullet and, make it work. But the culture has become across the world. A lot of this happened post the Second World War. After the Second World War, in the whole process of producing bombs, there were a lot of nitrates were used, and what many governments started doing was using those nitrates in agriculture, on the land. And what nitrates do is they help things to grow fast. However, there's a consequence. It may work initially, but you have to keep feeding it to continue on. And the whole green revolution, which was there in India and other places in the developing world, these big companies like Monsanto and others produce fertilizers with these nitrates, making people think, oh yes, this is the gold, only to find out that they need a lot more water. You need to replant these you have to keep fertilizing these fields, and it didn't really work, and it led to many farmers in India and places committing suicide. I know even to this day in America there are many people who are in great difficulty, and suicide's it exists there in America also, because some of these big companies are selling this vision and this particular thing, which in a way that people become dependent and they're not able to free themselves. So that's what happened post Second World War, and the whole idea of industrializing farms went into dairy areas also, and so they started producing dairies to see what they could do, how they could produce more and more milk. And the whole American model was all to do with this bovine growth hormone, BSH, which is, bovine growth hormone, so BGH, I think that's what it's called. And so they started, they pumped this into cows, so they produce more and more milk, insane amounts of milk. But it's, these cows have become slaves. They've become slaves to the whole industry. There's no conscience behind those farmers which produce that milk, and it's done on huge scales. So nowadays, when people, particularly in America, there's very little thing as clean milk, and you're not even able to produce raw milk, from my understanding. There are many parts of the world where you can't even drink milk straight from the cow. It's seen as legislation has been tied up in such a way that people are made to think it's a poisonous thing, it's a dangerous thing. And the more and more milk is processed, the more and more foods are processed, it means people become less immune to anything slightly different. Health falls, and people become dependent on the state and the medicines, and there's a whole industries of pharmaceuticals which base themselves on the issues which come up as a result of people's ill health because of the way food is produced and processed. And milk's become one of those things. Our whole approach to this project is all to do, we want, once the farm gets established, we want it to be off the grid. And we want to be able to set up a whole system which is like a closed loop system. We very much work in tandem with nature. We have a very strong sort of conservation ethic. On our land, we want to farm in a way that, our cows are graziers, and we had the Wildlife Trust come and visit the land, and they did a little bit of a survey and were able to show that the diversity of plants and various species of other animals which are on the farm has increased since our cows came onto the land. So we very much want to work in tandem with the environment. In relation to climate change, many people bring up this whole argument of methane and cows. We say that it's a distraction. People are really pointing fingers at cows when it's really themselves they should be pointing at. Really, the whole cows have existed for thousands of years, and they've been interlaced with nature, and there's been no issues of climate change. Modern man comes, creates industrial farms, huge farms, big problems with water, slurry, and all sorts of things, and then they point fingers at the cows. The issues are their problems, not the cows' problems. We have a very small number of cows. We have a total of 40 cows at the moment, and are growing our herd to maybe 50 to 60 cows. We'll see how it develops. And if our land bank increases, we'll increase our herd. But we work very carefully. We manage our herd according to the size of our land bank, or size of our property. And our cows are pasture fed, organic, and we're primarily hand milking. When cows work, eat just natural grass, there are not issues of methane. Several years ago, there was a report that came out called Livestock's Long Shadow, and it was an erroneous report that came out saying that cattle are the cause of climate change. It was really deflecting deflecting attention from the fossil fuel industries, which is really where the majority of methane is produced in terms of extracting fossil fuels. Cows and ruminants got the back end of that. They were the ones who got the blame for it. And at that time, a film called Cowspiracy came out and used those facts, and then became well known. However, the same organization subsequently retracted their statements and put them right, but that wasn't picked up by the press. In nature, plants are working in a cycle. They produce at night. They produce carbon dioxide. In the daytime, they produce oxygen. That same carbon, which goes in the air, is eaten by the cows in grass, and then it's released again in the form of methane. Now, methane doesn't last in the air very, very long. It decomposes into carbon dioxide again. So nowadays there's plenty of research to be done, and nobody's got the clear facts as yet. But there's two schools. One school is saying that there's a natural amount of carbon which exists in the cycle. So that goes in through the cycle, through plants, through the air, through animals, back in the soil and out again. And so whatever cows and other ruminants are producing, whatever methane, and which turns into carbon dioxide again, which is being produced, it's already there in the bank, as it were. So it's within the loop of the natural cycle of life. What's creating climate change is what additional carbon is being put in. And that carbon actually comes from the extraction of fossil fuels. Now, when fossil fuels are extracted, natural gases come out, and the other processes which add to the carbon in the air, which is really the cause of climate change, the increase of temperature and so forth. So it's a misnomer that actually cows and other ruminants are the cause. There was a strong vegan lobby, and there were adverts in the paper which certain organizations put in, which pointed the fingers to cows. But I thought it was outrageous. It's just ridiculous. Human beings create these problems, and then they shift the blame to somebody else. What arrogancy. How outrageous, how outrageous it is that human beings can do this. They create the problems and they blame other animals in the natural kingdom. They've killed off so much life in so many, the coral reefs, that, so many different species, the Amazon forest being destroyed for logging. And they have the audacity to blame other animals for the problems that they're creating. I think the whole thing's a joke. Sometimes there are many vegans who live in, and now this is another way to see it, that I know many vegans who are city vegans in California or in LA or wherever they may be, or in London. But their carbon footprint, because of the almond milk they drink or the soya milk they drink, their footprint is much greater than the footprint of a farmer who grows his own chicken and eats that chicken. So it's not like for like, actually. When one really analyzes these things, one can look at the details. You can see that even the modern lifestyle of a very ethical vegan is it's based on industrial farming. Ahimsa wants to demonstrate that industrial farming is not the future. Okay, if people want to eat meat, then eat it, but grow your own. Do it in a sustainable way with those animals. But industrial farming is the big issue of the day, and we're very much against that approach. We strongly believe that you can work in a lighter way, less impactful, low impact living is the way forward, and to work with nature and the world around us. Trees have consciousness, then that's why they grow. Plants have consciousness, but we work with them rather than exploit them. You can't say, oh, you're exploiting one animal, but the earth is a living being. And for us, it's all a question of how to work in a relationship with Mother Earth, with Mother Cow, with Mother Nature, and to really harmoniously work in this way, rather than say cancelling out this, cancelling out that, cancelling out everything, but still using industrial farming. The world. I went to a very, very interesting conference, and there was a whole discussion about how tractors, how farmers think that they're saving time and money by using tractors. Nowadays, in the UK, the average farmer may have, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 acres of land, and it'll be 1.5 people managing that land. Is that good use of land space and people power? I don't think so. I think people need to reconnect with nature and to work with the land and with nature, and there needs to be a more an equitable approach to farming, where farmers are not exploited and the land is not exploited, and things are grown in a more natural way rather than an artificial way with big machines. And the farmers don't actually, most of their profit remains the same, but they're spending more money paying for the machines that they're buying or they're contracting out to. Some people consider that we're a bit backward, and yes, maybe we're seen as cranks and going backwards. But I think if we look at the figures these days in terms of mental health, people in Southeast Asia, in the greatest of adversity, are much happier, and those living in the North America or in Europe. In fact, the suicide rate, the happiness, the study that was done by the I think it was the Happiness Foundation, or there's an organization which conducts how happy people are. People are not as happy in Europe as they are in Southeast Asia. And in Southeast Asia are using all these backward methods of farming and simple ways of living. I think for us, it's very much all about to really gain real happiness, we have to reconnect with the land. And we want to show that, yes, there is room for simplicity. We're not saying that we have the answer for everybody, and we're not saying that, Ahimsa is the model for everybody either. But we just want to show a small model, and if people like it, they can practice it. In fact, we have many, many similarities to vegans. We want to stop industrial farming, but we believe there's a place for cows and there's a place for milk. We want to be able to work with the world and cows. And I used to be a hardcore vegan, but I want to show a way that we can still drink milk and still treat cows nicely. On occasion, people do ask us why we keep oxen. They're the sort of they come as a result of producing milk, and but there's not a use for them. And if they end up taking up land space, it just detracts from growing other things. Well, this is where Ahimsa departs from the narrative of sort of mainstream society. We value life, and we believe very strongly that we can't play God. We're not there to take somebody else's life. So many parts of the world are being destroyed, and the environment's being destroyed. What gives us the right to take life or to destroy something else, to exploit something else? So what our whole approach to farming is that, yes, we're not producing milk just for milk production, because we have a relationship with the cows, and we have a we want to create a family. You know, the cows that are there, I consider them my children. You know, they're my family. So we look after them, and it's a symbiotic relationship. And it's quite interesting. The normal Western sort of narrative in how to work with nature and the world around them is often a relationship of stewardship, that things are there for us to utilize. However, in the Eastern sort of religions and Eastern thought processes, you know, be it Buddhism or Hinduism or the like, it's very much how to work in harmony with the world. And our outlook is very much to do with, Ahimsa's outlook is how to work in harmony with the world around them, rather than exploit the resources, to live and work with whatever is there, rather than think, well, there's no use for this, so let's get rid of it. You know, the snakes are there, but there's no use for them, let's just get rid of them. Or the woodlands are there, they're coming in our way, let's exploit them and get rid of them. It's more to do with how can we coexist with other life forms in this world. And cows have consciousness, animals have consciousness, so we don't have a right to interfere and to take that away from them. But we want to work in harmony, rather than say that we're, you know, they're there for our use. So it's a different outlook, and so that's the route that Ahimsa takes. So as a result of having that, people do sometimes say, well, what do you do with the oxen? We would like to use oxen for their strength, and we would like to use them back on the land in a way, not in an abusive way, but in a land that they can in a way that they can use their muscle. And you know, we facilitate them having a place where they can stay alive and continue living, but we engage them in farm work, or in producing grains, in producing other foodstuff, and using their dung for high quality compost with which we can grow vegetables. So our whole approach and ethos is to engage other animals in a natural way in the farming environment, but without abusing them or exploiting them. Our whole model is a micro dairy. We are still at a very early stage, and although we're making ends meet, we've still got a little distance to go to really start to show other dairies how we're doing it. We really, right at this present moment, there are two particular projects that are of prime importance to me. One is that we need to get our vegetable box scheme going, and the second one is that we have to get our ox economy going. It's very easy to focus just on the dairy, because that's bringing in some money, and it's easy for us to increase the price of the milk if we wanted to. But really, we want to show a model that's a family-based model. We don't want just the girls to be the workers, we want the boys to work as well. So I'm really very keen that within the next couple of years, you know, our box scheme is going, so the vegetables, the dung is used, our box scheme is growing, and I know there's an appetite for that because we've already trialed it a couple of years ago. We have a waiting list of people who want our vegetables which are made from, you know, even our compost means there's no slaughter at all. Sometimes organic may involve slaughter as well, but this is no slaughter. So there are people who are waiting for our vegetables. And I think for me, one of the most important areas is our ox program. We haven't been able to dedicate enough time to our ox program, but we do have a number of things in the pipeline. We're looking at production of grains, we're looking at production of energy, and we're looking at production of oils, of cold press oils. And those are key things which will help us to kickstart aspects which will generate income. So the model is that it becomes a holistic model rather than one just based on milk. We're not really, although milk has been our sort of number one seller or the prime thing that we've been talking about, because that's raised awareness, slaughter-free milk. Really, we want to show a model that's a holistic family model, and we do want to engage our boys as well as we are our girls. For anything to be successful, there has to be adversity, and have we been through adversity? We've been through adversity. We, perhaps we started the wrong way around. We started to talk about milk, and perhaps that wasn't always the best thing. We should have perhaps worked out all the solutions for oxen. However, having said that, we took a particular route, and we did face many challenges. Right from the beginning, there were challenges in terms of quality of milk, in terms of delivery, in terms of um, just pulling it together. There were many challenges, and we've gone through many challenges, and the learning curve's been quite steep, and it still is there. And I often compare our project to climbing Everest. What Ahimsa want to do is that in time demonstrate a model, a small model, where a dairy farmer can, sustain himself or herself. And our model is very much a community-based model. Some of our early inspiration was from the CSAs, community-supported agriculture, both in America and in Europe. And how we started our farm was that when we went to common work, we had to buy a separate tank so that we could separate the milk from those 6 cows into a separate tank. So that cost us £25,000. So a few people gifted us some money, and some people gifted us money, but we paid them back in milk. So community-supported agriculture is all to do with communities who care about something very important, and they're happy to support it, and they're happy to share the results. So we started our whole project in that very small way. Actually, in those early days when we started, our milk, by the time we got our milk to our customers, they only had 2-3 days left, and the quality wasn't always quite perfect. It was a real learning curve, and there were many challenges, but it was a community-supported dairy model that we worked on, and so we've gradually grown that. So we have a membership. We're not dependent on external factors, whether Brexit or whether, the governments are changing, because we have a group of people who are committed and care about cows, and we provide a certain quality of milk to them, and they're happy to reciprocate. So that's what we want to demonstrate in time, that it is possible to develop small dairies or cottage industries and work with the small group of people, pretty much like the community-supported agriculture model, just tweaked to suit this particular situation. Presently, Ahimsa Dairy Foundation has, presently we have about 200 sponsors who regularly sponsor our cows. You can sponsor our cows at £3, £5, £10, so forth. And we have over 400 members who are supporting us. And so some people say, well, I thought, you're supposed to be self-sustaining. Well, we have a system that, again, we started from grassroots, and we it's almost like a community-supported agriculture model. And so our members are really helping us to purchase the land on which the cows, live, and the land's the long-term insurance really for the cows. So we have, in total over 500, 600 people who regularly contribute to the project and helping us to grow in a very small way. They may give £9, £10 a month or so, and we have a few people who give slightly larger sums of money on a regular basis because they're inspired by the vision. So our whole approach is to engage and mobilize more and more people. Our message is quite broad in the sense that really we're very much aligned to the environmental movement. Our ethics are very much aligned to the environmental ethics of the day, and we want, for us, the cow's the center. Our economics model is around the cow, and we want to show that actually the cow has a very special place because cow dung is quite unique. It's really green gold, and so we want to show a model around that. We could have other things. The cow's not a fashionable animal. People have dealt with horses and llamas and other sorts of animals, but we want to focus on the cow because cows are not fashionable. Cows are seen as nobody's really interested in cows, but we want to focus in on the cow, And we're growing a movement of people who like and love cows and who like and love milk as a result of it. And we want to just to bring the spotlight on that. And there is growing interest. A lot of people drink milk, and a lot of people, want to support in this, in this way. We have so not only do we have a large number of members, we have a waiting list of over 1,000 people who want our milk. So, should we be expanding? Well, yes, we should, but organically. We don't want to suddenly expand overnight and then find that everybody changes and, we're left with a whole lot of cows. Gradually, our plan is to meet that demand and to be able to make, we run 2 markets in London, Queen's Park in NW6 and Chapel Market in Islington. And, we have a lot of people who come regularly to buy our milk, £4.50 a litre. But at the same time, we want to just grow organically, not suddenly. We do have some well-wishers who a few celebrities who want to support us, who are supporting us to move forward, who want to really grow the whole initiative. But we want to be careful how we do that, and we're just campaigning on that front at the moment. One of our ambassadors is Chrissie Hynde, who was the lead singer of the Pretenders. So for those who are from the sort of late 70s and 80s, they'll know of Chrissie Hynde. Perhaps the younger generation less so. We've had some very good media coverage. Last year we had a spot on Country File, which is BBC's Sunday evening farming programme, very, very famous and popular. And we had some other radio interviews. We had a lot of press coverage also in the Times, the Mail, and a number of other papers. Also, actually, we were very fortunate because Mary McCartney was a guest editor in the National Geographic, and she did a special piece about the farm and a photo piece and a very popular article in the National Geographic. So that was very good coverage for us. And we're just in the process of doing another session, another piece with the BBC, which will come out next Easter. So in terms of our ISKCON world, Srila Prabhupada so often talked about setting up farms and farm communities and really producing our own milk. I was just reading just last night actually that even in the early days in the Krishna Balaram temple, when devotees were establishing that first temple in Vrindavan, that because of drinking buffalo milk, they were all falling ill. So Prabhupada said, we should set up our own Goshala, have our own cows, so we can drink, have milk from our cows for the devotees and for the deities. So I think that's in the long run. Sometimes there's a debate within the movement, should we, what milk should we drink? Naturally, I feel that we want to show a model whereby we can produce our own milk and encourage Goshalas to be producing milk, but in a sustainable way. As a society, we have a checkered history whereby, sometimes our herds grew to big sizes and we weren't able to really look after them properly. So we're just trying to show something in a very small way. And if it catches on, perhaps other farms will take it on. But we just want to be able to show a means whereby milk can be produced from protected cows. And now the GBC has also set out a program for encouraging temples across the world to try and acquire their milk from protected herds by 2022. So we hope to play some part in that. We're working with the Global Ministry for Cow Protection to produce a course, to develop a course, so we can train devotees to work on farms and develop a model that is a sustainable model and pioneer a way forward.